But we do begin with that dramatic new testimony in the trial surrounding a double murder in a powerful South Carolina legal dynasty. The court now on a lunch break. We will bring it back live as the proceedings resume. But earlier, Sergeant Daniel Green, detective of the Colleton County Sheriff's Office, today becoming the first witness called in the trial of Murdaugh, that disgraced attorney accused of killing his wife and son. Green was the first to respond to the scene of the murders and took the stand, describing those moments that he first spoke with Murdaugh after he says he found the bodies of his wife Maggie and son Paul.
You ultimately had a conversation with Mr. Murdaugh for a fairly extended period of time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you ever see any tears in your interactions with Mr. Murdaugh?
He did not appear to be crying. He was upset, but I did not see any visible tears.
Did Mr. Murdaugh tell you that he had any sort of firearm?
He did. He stated that he had left from that scene, went to the residence, grabbed a shotgun from that residence, and then brought it back because he felt like he needed to have it just in case something else were to happen.
He told you he had gone back to the residence after finding the victims to get that gun?
He did.
What, if anything, did you do once he told you that he had gotten a gun?
First, he pointed out where the gun was. It was leaning against the vehicle that he was driving at the time. I could see that it was a camouflage shotgun. I spoke with him for a few more minutes, and just based off of how nervous he was acting and anxious and upset, I decided it was in everyone's best interest to get that shotgun and secure it in my vehicle so that no one else had access to it.
Murdaugh is accused of shooting and killing his wife and youngest son in June of 2021. He has pleaded not guilty to the murders, but admits he tried to stage his own murder just months later so his surviving son could collect the insurance payout. For more, let's bring in attorney Brian Buckmire, ABC News contributor, also host of Law and Crime Network. So, Brian, that was some pretty compelling testimony from the first witness, that responding officer, Sergeant Daniel Green. What do you think? Was it damning?
It's compelling, but I think a crafty defense attorney maybe would have turned that to something that works for him. What I would expect is the defense attorney to say, you've never met Alex Murdaugh before. You don't know how he grieves. You don't know how he cries. You don't know what his response would be upon coming across his wife and son brutally murdered this way. Now, initially, of course it looks bad. Why wouldn't you be crying? We're seeing him crying in court as you're just talking about this. So I think for the prosecution, they're kind of leading the way here in terms of proving their case, but that's to be expected when they put on their first witness. They get to dictate how their case in chief works. It's for the defense to kind of hack away at it little by little.
So, as you saw, the prosecution was asking Green about his first moment speaking with Murdaugh at the scene of the murders. Let's take a listen to what he described.
When you ultimately approached Mr. Murdaugh, what's the first thing that you did?
The first thing I did was ensure that he did not have any weapons on him. That's standard procedure for arriving on a scene like that. Any kind of weapons that are anywhere on the scene, I want to be aware of just so I can know whether they're there or not, and if they are there, who has access to them at any point. And that's for my safety as well as other responding officers and for anyone else that's on scene.
Did Mr. Murdaugh give you any possible explanation for this when you approached him?
His immediate reaction was to start telling me about an incident that had happened with his son with a boating accident.
With the boating accident?
Yes, sir.
Had you asked him anything about that?
I did not.
Well, Brian, body cam footage from the day of the murders presented in court also showed Murdaugh speaking with officers, telling them that his son Paul was getting threats and getting punched for his involvement in that boat crash in 2019 that killed Mallory Beach. This just keeps getting more intricate and difficult and a lot of things to follow. But why do you think the prosecution was honing in on that specifically?
So I think the prosecution is going to paint the picture that this is a man that's trying to distract and point the finger away from him, that Alex Murdaugh is a seasoned prosecutor. I mean, so was his father, so was his father and his father before that. So they're trying to show that he's crafty enough that after murdering his wife and son, that he would then try to throw this investigation off of him to kind of suggest, hey, I just got here. Maybe this is why they're murdered in this fashion. Someone who had made a threat in the past must have made good on their word. I think the prosecution is putting that forward to create that narrative to try to prove their case.
So Green also testified that he asked Murdaugh about the number of tire tracks that he noticed around the bodies, noting that there were more than what would appear if Murdaugh was the only person driving up to the scene. So what do you make of that?
That, I think, can go actually both ways. For the prosecution, they want to keep hammering home that Murdaugh is a liar, that he said he came across their body, took the ATV or the vehicle, and then went to go get a shotgun, and then came back because he was worried that he may need to use it. Maybe the perpetrator, the actual shooter, was close by. Well, if that happens, you're only going to see 2 sets of tire treads, going away and then coming back. The prosecution is planting the seed that there are too many for his story to make sense. They don't know what the actual story could be, but they could argue that, hey, maybe this is him going back and forth, trying to clean up the crime scene. We know that there was a raincoat that was found with gunshot residue on it, but that wasn't at the scene. There's also 2 guns that are missing from this case. Maybe he disposed of them somewhere that we haven't found yet. And so planting that seed of multiple tire treads does that. But the defense comes back and says, well, did you document it properly? Did you tell anyone to do so? They're attacking not the facts, but the investigation to try to make headway in that argument.
So Murdaugh's attorneys, though, argued that there's still no direct evidence or eyewitnesses tying him to the crime, that he truly loved his wife, Maggie, that, Paul was, quote, the apple of his eye. But is that enough of a defense?
I don't think it's enough of a defense. I think this case is going to need multiple defenses because the prosecution has multiple ways of trying to convict Alex Murdaugh. And in the argument as to this was a crime to gain sympathy and cover up financial crimes, that's what the prosecution is arguing. The defense is countering that by saying he loved his family. Why would he go to this extent to cover up financial crimes? They'll probably argue that we have seen financial crimes across this country for centuries, and we've never seen someone kill their wife and kid to try to hide that. That what makes more sense is that someone else murdered these people because he loved his family, and not this theory that the prosecution is putting forward. So I think it helps, but I don't think it's the winning argument for the defense.
Now, do you think Murdaugh will actually take the stand and testify in his own defense? And is that a good or a bad thing? Kind of lay out the scenario of what you think about that.
So don't forget, Murdaugh is unique in his ability to testify. As a defense attorney, I only have to potentially prepare my client to testify. But prosecutors, they are prepping hundreds, if not thousands of people to testify throughout their career. And on top of that, his father was a prosecutor, his father's father was a prosecutor, his father's father was a prosecutor. Prepping witnesses and doing direct examination is literally in this man's blood. So I would suspect that he would be a better person to testify than most professional people who do testify. I think that gives him the advantage, and that creates a more likely than not scenario where he will testify. Because with no eyewitness and no direct evidence, the best person, the only person who knows what happens when he got to that scene is Alex Murdaugh, and he might be the Hail Mary pass the defense needs to carry this case beyond a reasonable doubt.
All right, stay with us, Brian. I understand we got Eva Pilgrim. She's there on the ground. She was inside the courtroom. She joins us now. Eva, so glad you could be a part of this conversation. So we were talking about the body cam footage, Eva, when it was showed in court today. What was the reaction from the jury when they saw that?
Well, Kira, the jury was very much engaged. We saw a lot of the jurors leaning forward with their hands on their under their chins, very much watching this video step by step as the state laid out everything that this first responder who was there on the scene was seeing and encountering. You know, this is the first time that we have seen and heard this video of Alex Murdaugh the night that these murders happened, and what his demeanor was like. And he walked those jurors step by step through the process of what he was encountering on that night. The other interesting thing I noticed as we were sitting in that courtroom was when he mentioned that Alex was on the phone, he was calling, he thought it was his brother. I remember having a conversation with John Marvin Murdaugh, his brother, who received a phone call from the scene, and how affected he was. It was a very difficult phone call to get, and he was tearful in his conversation with me, hearing his brother in that state. In the courtroom, I saw him hang his head down and just shake his head because he remembered quite obviously how it felt getting that phone call that night. You also saw, I thought, very interestingly, the defense go up and try to start poking holes in what is this evidence. Could there have been other evidence that we don't know about? Was something contaminated? Did they look at all the options there on the scene, starting to raise questions about what there could or could not have been, Kira?
So a couple of questions for you, Eva, if you don't mind. Other members, we've been talking so much about the legal dynasty of this family. They're very well known in the area, father, grandfather, great-grandfather, all lawyers. Are you seeing other family members show up, show support? Have you been able to talk to any other family members? Kind of, we're talking about a very powerful family in the area, apparently, and a lot of people have used them for lawyers throughout the decades. What's the vibe like, with regard to who he has there to support him?
Well, we are seeing John Marvin Murdaugh was in court today with his wife. We saw Buster Murdaugh there with, I believe it was his girlfriend. They were sitting all together, kind of to themselves. There are members of this community that they know well that they were having some conversations with, but for the most part trying to avoid talking to members of the national media for sure, kind of turning the other way if someone was to walk up to them, and just watching what was happening in this courtroom. They're sitting right behind Alex Murdaugh there in the courtroom, watching all of this unfold.
Got it. And another question, this was all of us were asking yesterday, what's the understanding with the name? We've been saying Alex Murdaugh, and now we're told Alex Murdaugh. Can you explain what has happened here with his name? Because clearly we've been reporting on this for a very long time, and there has been this change on what exactly do we call this man.
So I think some of the confusion is quite frankly, I'm from South Carolina, so I feel comfortable saying this, is the Southern accent. So people are hearing the way that they say their name and they're confused about what the pronunciation is. I asked his brothers when we interviewed them, when this originally happened back in June 2021, how do you say your last name? And you could hear Alec in the 911 call say his own name. They said, they actually say Alec when they pronounce his name, but they told me that the correct pronunciation would be Alec, like A-L-E-C. And then Murdaugh is how he says it. And you hear him on the tapes and in the videos say his name that way.
Got it. I'm going straight to the source, and that is you, because you know that family. You've been covering this from the very beginning, and you're right. I lived in the area for a number of years. There is a very strong accent, so you just want to get it right. Eva, I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much. And Brian, thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.